Do you even spar at your gym, bro? I mean, come on. Never work in a real fight.
Karate is so last century. Have you heard of Conor McGregor? MMA is so much better.
Do the crane, Johnny.
Who taught you karate? Your grandma?
My sensei could beat your sensei in Kumite.
The original no-touch master, MC Hammer. You can't touch this.
That shit wouldn't work in the streets.
That would never work on me.
Muay Thai would beat this in a minute.
Karate without belts? How the damn hell are you supposed to hold your pants up?
We would totally own your punk ass in our gym.
Get him a buddy bag!
Useless in the cage.
Bushido? More like bullshido.
Quit karate. Join the army.
It's just karate.
I don't know what I just watched. I don't even know how to say it, dude. You suck at life.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to Karate Without Belts. I'm John.
I'm Jeremy.
Jeremy's gonna open this episode with a can of whoop ass.
I don't know about that, but it's when I was talking to John earlier. There's something this week that kind of came up, and it's kind of coinciding into the topic we're going to get into tonight. But it really ticked me off. And what I really want to do is call out all these little pansies that are behind the keyboard and they don't do squat. And
Pansies. That's what we're going with.
I'm going to go, well, I'd like to go with something. But
this is how we decide on topics, where I'll like think of something for a week and then Jeremy will pound his fist and be like, this thing happened. I'm like, all right, we're going there.
And I'll tell you this circumstance. And what it was is a guy that I taught Manji Sai to a while back put a video up of him doing a demo of Manji Sai. And it, overall, I mean, it was pretty good. I haven't talked to him in years, but I mean, if he called me and asked me, hey, what did you think of it? Would you critique it? Things like that. You know, yeah, sure. I would say, hey, look, I thought it looked pretty good. You might want to think about this, or this, you know, but that's up to you how you want to do it. But there was a little troll that left a comment on there stating something that, one, he had no knowledge of what he was talking about. Two, he was an idiot. And number three, it was just a really crappy comment and left nothing to build off of. That's kind of what I'm irritated about, is when people basically just vomit on somebody else and not leave anything else for somebody else to pick up and actually move a conversation. Look, I'm all for debate. That's cool. I mean, doesn't matter what it is. You want to talk about something? Let's debate something.
We're red-blooded Americans. We believe in debate.
Well,
might not go anywhere, but we believe in it.
Hey, we believe in it. I mean, but it was just, bleh, this is what it is. And it was like, you know what? Number one, your comment was so ignorant. You showed how the lack of training and how totally stupid you are. And I hope you're listening, because you can get a hold of me. That's fine. I'll have a discussion with you. It doesn't bother me.
Get him on Twitter. He's on TikTok now.
Yeah.
Jeremy, we've gotten him in this TikTok account. He's good friends with a lot of the TikTokers on there. He's throwing up a lot of interesting videos. You should check him out.
Yeah. It could have completely been changed if the person was like, look, I've been taught this way. You're doing this. I don't understand. What's the rationale behind it? If he would have just stated that, it's like you could have moved a discussion and both of you could have learned off of each other. The person that I taught they could enhance what they've actually been taught, and this person could actually be educated and instead of being stupid. Okay, so, and instead of just hiding behind a keyboard and just being a moron. It's one of those things that I've been pretty irritated about, and I think it gets into our topic. Whenever you're commenting on the internet, I mean, we're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff, but
Right.
But when you're commenting on the internet, don't just you just suck or this, that, or the other thing. It's like, no. Why? Why does this person suck? I mean, get into it a little bit. Hey, I mean, I even reached out to one person years ago, and I didn't do that, but I said, look, I see you got an interest in this weapon. You don't look like you're real fluid with it. Would you like somebody to teach you how to be fluid with it and actually work with the weapon? Obviously, I didn't hear back from that person, but it was something enough to open up a dialogue.
Right, whether or not that's responded to. And I think also in 2020, it's just not possible to have the same kind of anonymity, whichever way that word is pronounced, that we once did. And I think we can kind of backtrack this to a little bit. So this is a very much of an internet thing, right? Something that is only, what, 20, 30 years into our species history.
If that.
Yeah, if that. And like even in like what was once considered something only like people like who are living in their mother's basements do is now essentially the norm and has become a endemic part of our society.
And I want to tag on to that a little bit, in which
Sure.
I think it's because people can hide behind their keyboards or whatever else, that they think that they can communicate and they really can't. And I think I'm not just completely picking on these people, but I'm picking on our society as a whole. I think now that we do have this access to easy communication, we really don't communicate very well a lot of times.
Let's take a step back for a minute, because I think that's what's needed to kind of contextualize this.
Yeah.
There's a word for this in Japanese that we all kind of, at least slightly know, is kuchibushi, where it literally just means mouth warrior. Someone who shoots off their mouth, someone who sees something and makes a comment on that. Pre-internet days, before this would happen, you actually needed a kind of a dose of courage in some way, shape, or form to make some sort of comment on that. Now, whether or not that's just out of just shooting your mouth off or some form of pride or arrogance,
or some form of liquid enhancement too. So.
Exactly, or a little bit combination of all three. We're not picky here.
No.
But I feel like this is something that would actually probably not be said in front of anybody, would be said in private or would be said around people you trusted. So An example would be like if you took a class with someone, or if you were at an event with somebody, or you met with somebody, to that person's face, you might be okay. You might be decent to them. But behind their back, or when they're not there, just say whatever you want about them to the people you trusted or the people you thought, would agree with you. I would guess that would be a fair assumption. And this is not something that doesn't happen today.
Right.
But I feel like in pre-overly saturated internet, this is something that tended to happen, I think, a little more. And I think that's where that kind of manner came from, where it's like, to that person's face, very rarely to that person's face would you actually say what you're really thinking. But to other people's faces, you would just kind of say what you needed, and psychologically, the feeling would go away or whatever. Now, especially with what's going on today, but even before then, it's now perfectly fine to say whatever you want as long as you had the anonymity of the keyboard, supposedly. And even it's funny when people don't use their full names when they make accounts or whatever, and then they'll even go out there and say even more information about themselves, which is just, if you've ever seen Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, you're gonna leave yourself open to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
But I guess pre-internet, has there any? You have a longer memory of this than I do.
You say I'm old?
I'm saying you have a longer memory of this than I do. That's all. That's all. You've the ones you stated your age on the podcast.
No,
I'm not making that mistake. So,
No, I got you.
but what do you think? Do you feel like that's the case now, especially as things had progressed, in and outside of martial arts?
Well, I think it's not just. I don't think it's just the martial arts community as a whole. I mean, obviously,
Right.
and me personally, I think it should stay out of the martial arts community. I think everyone should try to, not trying to build some utopian paradise or anything like that, but I think people should be able to learn off anybody else. It is interesting. I used to work security for one of the NFL stadiums, and I remember I was mentoring with this one guy, real good guy. I wish I could remember right now. I just can't remember the guy's name. Real good guy. And he took me under his wing, and basically said, 99% of your fights and things like that in confrontations can be resolved if you just know how to communicate and you know how to deal with people and work with people. I got to see that a lot with him, and he was so good. I mean, you'd have almost a brawl going on, and I'd watch this guy, he'd take me with him wherever he went. And him and I mean, mainly he was the one that was directing it, but him and we would literally break up almost brawls that were getting ready to break out. And he'd get it to the point where everybody was shaking hands, buying each other beers and everything else, and everything was just good. I mean, it was, he would get people to actually see things. And I think a lot of people are not present or in the moment to that. They just say whatever's on their opinion. And I think these people think that, hey, I've got an opinion, therefore it matters, when, you know what, Mom always used to say, opinions are like buttholes. Everybody's got one, and not everybody wants to see it.
And obviously you don't want to always see somebody's opinion, but the internet is foreseeing lots of that opinion, as it were.
Yeah.
And this is what's interesting, is that in those situations, in the kind of revelrous situations that you were talking about, as like a sports stadium,
yeah,
people are going to obviously get into it in some way, shape, or form, and generally it's from whatever reason. This is why I tended to avoid sports stadiums when I lived in the States.
It's interesting. Obviously nobody can go into the sports stadiums now, but I really don't have fun going to sports stadiums anymore, because I'm constantly looking through the sports stadium, seeing where there's getting ready to be a confrontation, where there's going to be, I'm constantly doing that, and it's no fun. And so I think a lot of things get into it where a lot of people think that they know something, and they become proud of, well, I know this. Well, maybe you need to shut up and listen. And that was a lot of what the guy did. He goes, hey, look, I'm going to let this guy talk. We're going to work this stuff out. I'm going to let him talk first. And I remember even a couple times where they'd keep yelling. I was like, okay, stop. We're going to do a coin flip. And he'd take out a quarter. You'd call heads or tails. And you're okay. You want to talk first? You want to listen first? And he did that a couple times. And it was like,
that's like a magic trick, because getting a bunch of angry people to calm down and just talk. That's a magic trick right there.
Sometimes it was, but in some ways it was kind of like, it was almost like competitive, where it was like, okay, you're competing against each other, not so much fist fighting, but you're competing against each other. Who's going to win the coin flip? Who's going to talk first? And so and what was funny is every time he did that, everything calmed down real quick. Now, is that going to work every time? No. But he was able to get into people's reality really, really quick.
Now, what's the one thing about that situation and the situation we began with that's completely different? Presence, right?
Well, presence, and the other thing is, I think, presence and pride. Pride gets into the way of, well, this is my ego and I know better than you. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you do know more than what somebody else does, then please share it and don't be such a hobbit or something like that and just basically keep it to yourself.
Don't be a hobbit. Don't be a hobbit.
Or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. So, sorry, I'm still irritated, but
Jeremy on his pro-orc stance over here. But I agree in that, it was easier. It's easier to get people to be more conciliatory when there's presence involved. Because when there's presence involved, there's there's a chance of actually something popping off.
Right.
When the internet came around, it became very easy, to go on the other side of it. It became a very easy place to put out and say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And to kind of do more of a sociology of it, in a weird way, especially when it came to karate. When you actually had the people who knew how to use the internet, what is it? I remember it was like Mike Miner was like one of the first people I saw online.
Yeah.
And for a long, long time, he was like the guy who had a website for Oyata and all that stuff. And then just that was the only information that was out there. Flash 20 years later, now it's this sea of chaotic nonsense where anything goes, and you have weird guys with 5 different color belts teaching karate on Facebook. But hey, if you're gonna do that, that's cool. I'm all in support of it. That's what you're doing. But it especially with that lack of presence and just this feeling of, well, no one can tell me not to do this. No one can say otherwise unless it's a comment that I can easily block or delete or ignore or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think to your point, that's where internet allows unhelpful criticism and then also unbridled pride to happen. And so I think this is what allowed for the move from being able to talk in a circle of friends to being socially removed from that, and nowadays even more, to now becoming the keyboard warrior.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm not saying, if somebody's doing something that's dangerous, not to call them out on it or something like that. And I mean, that's a total different subject.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a better response if you go into it more of a question and say, hey, I don't understand why you're doing this, because to me this would look like you're actually leaving yourself open. You're creating danger for the people you're teaching in this way. Can you please explain? If you do that, you're going to get feedback, and things are, maybe whoever's teaching may learn something too, and that's cool. I mean, I'll just go to a situation that happened over the last week. My daughter and I, we do some shadow boxing drills and things like that. And what was interesting is she was having a little bit of a hard time getting in on me and stuff. And then she kind of went off on her own, and she was working on a little bit of her dance moves or whatever for her class and stuff. And I told her, I'm like, if you incorporate just this on your shadow boxing, I think you'd probably get in on me a little bit easier. And she's like, okay. And so guess what? She used that, and boom. I mean, she was getting in on me. I'm like, and I knew it was coming. And I'm like, So guess what? I had to figure out how to counter that. But my daughter is 9. And guess what? I'm learning from her from a little bit different perspective. So
yeah, and there's the perspectives of that beautifully dovetails into this point, is that especially when you're talking about commenting and how real is the internet in a lot of ways, you forget that for a lot of people that there's 2 things. There's a generation gap, but there can also be a technology gap, because the generation doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of understanding how things work or how technology works and stuff like that. I still have family members who refuse to who believe that their mail is going to get stolen because everyone shares everyone has like the same like block that they go get their mail out of. The idea that of criticism or of making some sort of comment or becoming a keyboard warrior, this actually might be the only thing some people know how to do, or that's the example that they've seen, and so that's the example that they're going to follow.
You go back to, and I keep going back to a couple quotes from the movies, like, the Karate Kid, teacher say, student do, things like that. And then I also go back to one of our favorite movies, Remo Williams, in which basically says, a wise man listens while the fool chatters. And it's a great quote. And man, I mean, that's a very true quote. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody who's very foolish just shoot off at the mouth?
Well, and is that foolishness because they're a fool, or is that foolishness because they think that what they're doing, there's like some sort of weird call for comments? Because especially in this case, let's go back to what you were talking about initially. You're talking about somebody you had taught was demonstrating on the internet what you had taught them, right? The only way we can't step into the video and talk to them. We don't have Walt Disney levels of movie magic,
right,
or life preservation. Maybe one day, but the only means of doing that is through commenting, is through posting, is through, there's a crappy thing about YouTube now is that you used to be able to make reply videos.
Mm-hmm.
You used to be able to reply to a video and like just you can reply to other stuff online now. So instead of even just being able to make your own thing as a reply, you're left with the option of just writing a statement.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody's ability, martial arts or otherwise, does not necessitate being able to reply in any meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes to your point of saying, what's the point of even the person initially throwing this video online, other than to draw comments?
Well, I mean, you could.
It's not to criticize that, but I'm saying
right.
it's your only avenue in which you can interact.
Well, yeah, I mean, true, but I mean, also it can be, potential marketing material for, his school, that school or this, that, or the other thing too, and I get that too. And part of me is kind of step back, because like when I read it, I was pretty irritated. I really stepped back and I'm like, am I irritated because this person was somebody I taught? Or is it I'm irritated because this person really contributed nothing at all to a conversation?
And then that goes into a question of, is this person who's making that criticism or whatever, making a comment, is this form of which they're doing that even meaningful, right?
Well, and I even took it even a step further. I was like, okay, what about what I taught them? Am I taking it personal?
Right.
I looked at it from that perspective. I'm like, no, I mean, I think maybe at first my initial reaction might have been, I'll grant you that. But after I kind of stepped back from it a little bit and really kind of looked at it, I think I got over that pretty quick. It was more along the lines of, okay, this person put a comment in here that did nothing. I mean, it contributed nothing other than to inflate this person's ego, and that was it. And I think that's what really kind of like, you jerk.
But then, can you imagine like all the other? Now, imagine that 1,000-fold. Imagine that on like just about every other level, in every different part of society.
Well,
and I think this is where I say, especially when you're talking about, because I've done this, we have videos of me doing stuff, and then because a lot of what I do is you taught me, and I take every criticism or every like weird comment, I see them all. Everyone, it's not that I don't.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's a negative comment or it's a positive comment, it's still, you have to think about why those people are responding. And it is, and a lot of people are just enculturated to comment, respond, respond, respond. And is that we're in a society that's developing this. And other people have talked about this in Better Places. There's The Social Dilemma, that documentary that came on Netflix the other day. It's a really interesting study on like how things are designed to essentially elicit that kind of response and that kind of even that reaction. Like your reaction was even probably deeper, and because you actually knew the person.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
deeper so because you taught them.
Well, yeah. I mean, but the other thing is I've had some pretty extensive courses on, basically art of communication. And, during the time when I wanted to really get into upper management and all this kind of stuff, and realize that was more of a headache than I really wanted to deal with, in my life. But I can dissect when somebody starts a conversation and leaves it for an opening to where you can move a conversation forward and learn from it, as opposed to, well, I told you so. You know what? I mean, I told you so gets you nowhere. It gets nothing. It's as worthless as the toilet paper I wipe my butt with. Okay? Just stop. And if you really look at it, I think that's a big problem today on face whatever and the twit and whatever else, and what Insta crap and all these other social media outlets. It's like,
this shows the difference between even us, is that I understand where I'm like overly I don't want to say overly plugged in. I'm plugged into this stuff, but I have a very pale response to it. I used to have a very, like when I was younger, I was very like, especially when it was like just Facebook, I was very, very like overly like emotional response to it. Now it's just, to me, it's just pale. As someone like you who's been quiet to it, who has quietism to it, who doesn't engage with it at all. And then when you see something like that, I think that's actually very interesting, is that you actually have not necessarily been numbed to it.
Yeah. I think that's why I try to stay away from it as well, because a lot of what I do, I mainly deal with the ones and zeros in the background of all this stuff, on the internet, how it connects, all that kind of stuff. That's mainly what I do. That's what I do for a profession. And, once I'm done with that, I don't want to deal with face whatever and the twit and Insta crap and all this other stuff. I just don't want to deal with it. After doing it, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, I'd much rather do something with my kids,
And not everybody has kids. Not everybody has that other thing. And then what the problem has been, and I feel this is where the world in which the keyboard warriors live, the world in which the keyboard karate people live, is that a lot of the time they're probably not even training. A lot of the time it's probably people who probably did train and for whatever reason stopped, or do train but don't train that much, or they don't have a productive or constructive part of their lives. So this has become their way of being constructive.
Constructive.
To them, they think it's one and the same, right? It's an activity.
Yeah.
Right. And do you think that is out of pride, or do you think that is possibly out of desperation?
I think it's definitely building someone's ego, yes. Because if they're not really training, what good is any comment that they're going to mention be? Seriously.
Well, and I think that's the thing, where you have people who trained or had some understanding of it, or like will just watch, I don't know, MMA or whatever. Yeah. They will want to have their voice heard. Yeah. And I think it's not necessarily just pride and ego, but it's also, this is all I can do. Like, and if really, and I think to a degree, these systems have convinced people that this is a meaningful act, that this is a meaningful function. You could have a bunch of, to go back to what you were talking about, you could have a bunch of different people positively saying things, which could actually be worse. Because, for example, a video of somebody who is doing something completely wrong, or who And I say that in a very subjective way, right? You can have somebody doing something you showed them and you think it's completely wrong, and then you see a bunch of people positively saying things. How do you think that's going to make you react?
Right. I mean, I think in that instance, as an instructor, now I'm trying to remember a situation where I did see something like that. I know there was one instance several years ago where somebody had posted some video out there on something that I had showed them, and it was not quite right. It was going to get some people hurt, and basically I just sent them an email. I was like, hey, you got a chance, we need to talk. So, and because one, I really didn't want that responsibility coming back to me. Maybe part of it was I was looking out for myself, but also I was also looking out for those people too.
Right, and then there's a thing that you taught somebody, and you didn't want there to be something incorrect happening.
Right.
Like if we throw this back a couple years ago, none of this would have ever happened because no one had the ability to instantly show this. Right, we had VHS tapes at best, and you had people comment at events, and that was that.
Yeah, well, more than a couple years. Sorry, John. I know I'm getting older, but I'm not that old that I forget when VHS and Betamax was around. So.
Well, and that's what I mean. Where if you have to think about it to kind of positively construct this, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can take a positive note to being like, all right, so what this is an exemplary of an issue, right? The keyboard warrior. The people who badly comment on whatever video people put out there. What's a positive way we can direct this conversation? Don't make videos and don't put them on the internet.
No, I
completely quiet what karate does in terms of, because the world's now built on this. It's built on content. It's built on doing this.
Well, I mean, if you look at martial art and you look at karate, you look at jiu-jitsu, all that kind of stuff, you're looking at basically the art of combat, right? Art of combat, art of stopping combat, art of,
protection.
However you want to word it. If the only thing you're doing is throwing stuff out and not allowing somebody else to respond, because, I'll just kind of point out a little bit of what I got out of this very intense management communication course that I had several years ago. Was communication is definitely a two-way street. You can set up communication where you end it in one shot, or you open it up for a dialogue, and therefore that communication stream grows. And I think even as martial artists, you've got to be able to do that. And I look at several aspects in my life where that is so true. I mean, I look at when I was, work security for one of the NFL stadiums. I look at the time when I've mentioned this example a couple times, when the convenience store was getting ready to get robbed. If I would not have been present or in a natural state of mind to know to communicate with that person, that there would have definitely been gunplay in the middle of a convenience store robbery. I think of it in situations where I've been in boardrooms with the president of companies. I see that everywhere. I see that in a lot of aspects in life. I'm going to kind of go even a little bit more. I see it as you can see instances of some of the issues that we have today with some of these riots that are going on, protests, however you want to classify it. You see people that do not want to open up a dialogue and they kill it. And then you see some people that do want to open up that dialogue, have those conversations, and both sides get better from it.
And so in this particular instance, right, in this particular case, because those instances are all person to person, like physically, right?
Yeah.
In this case, which is becoming virtual, is becoming representative, right?
But the principles are still there.
Exactly. I 100% agree.
You can shut down a communication just like that, or you can open it up for dialogue and people learn from it.
But it is easier to kind of flip those switches faster when it comes to putting stuff online, as opposed to having things be in the present.
Right.
And that's where I think is the hard fact of where we are in the world, and even with martial arts, right? Because and this has become exasperated by today's events, is because people can't get together. They can't as easily or as readily see each other and work on things together. So they have to digitize it. They have to avatar it. And this is causing a much stronger flooding of keyboard warriors to come to the fold. So I think that kind of a way I think as people who create stuff, to engage with those type of people is to possibly show them your best hand before showing them your worst. Is where essentially saying, look, you're going to say this, no one's going to stop you. If you want to have a constructive dialogue, that's fine. But if you want to just keep on making these comments, then go somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it gets into ego. I think it gets into pride, and I think it also, on the flip side, it also develops your humbleness as well. And I think to truly have a dialogue with somebody, you've got to be able to be humble. You can't think that you know everything,
even if you're being attacked.
Even if you're being attacked.
We're talking online, obviously. We're not talking physically being attacked.
Well, I mean,
this person's punching me in the face, but I have to be humble. Listen to that.
Well, sometimes, think about it. Sometimes if you're humble, even in the middle of an attack, you're psychologically messing with that person.
That's maybe a different conversation for a different day.
You're looking at it a little bit different.
Right.
It's a different perspective. Now,
fighting is communication, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying, hey, I'm getting punched in the face, therefore I need to be humble. No, it's like you can at least throw up your hands and block, for God's sakes, but no, for goodness sakes. But it is an approach to take from it, and I look at some of these people, like some of these MMA fighters. There's a couple of them, like what was one guy's name? Forrest Griffin, I think it is. Several years ago. I remember watching the first time I saw him. I'm like, the guy looks like Opie Taylor from Mayberry. I'm like, what the heck's this guy gonna do? He gets in there.
Half of our audience is wondering what you're referencing, but
yeah, but he gets in there. It psychologically messes with the person, and he goes and just knocks the poop out of him. And I'm like, I like this guy. I can kind of, I like how this guy's approach is. He didn't look that threatening, but geez, you did a little mess with the guy. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes using that humbleness, using something that's not overtly combative, kind of going back to that whole concealment conversation that we had before. So
right,
that's where I'm getting at. So
right, and I think that you're running. The issue of pride. The issue of pride with these people is not always, but for a majority of the keyboard warriors we're talking about, is not a place of strength. It's a place. It's coming from their last source of. It's coming from their last source of identity. I think is that pride is where they see, I believe wrongly, is where they see their identity, and being proud of, I don't know, being a bad poster, being somebody who makes who says crappy things on the internet. I think that's where that comes from. And I think if anybody who's listening to this, including the person you were talking about made that comment, I guess this is also an invitation for them to reconsider what they thought or reconsider what they said, right? And a positive, and fine, reach out. Our email's on the marquee. You just talk to us, and we'll be happy to at least have that conversation. I think this is the ultimate karate lesson in a lot of ways, because if you're dealing with the people, and this is something you said very well last week, is people come in the door the teacher should always try to make everything a little better. And as just karate people in general, teachers, students, people who train, whatever, podcasters, what we're contributing should be positive. It shouldn't be negative. We can joke and be funny and ironic and all that other stuff. That's important. It's fun. That's fun. But if we're not going to have that kind of positivity and try to contribute something good, what's the point?
No, and I'll take it even a little bit further. I mean, even negative.
He's going to take it a little bit further. He's going to invite you into his house and going to make you a meal.
No, I mean, even a negative conversation, as long as the dialogue's still there, to come up with, people learning from certain instances and things like that, may resolve some ignorance that somebody has.
Right.
And like I said, it doesn't have to be all positive. It can be negative, but I think it just needs to be open. You need to leave that conversation open so that it has that opportunity to grow into what it can.
Right. And be constructive in terms of the negativity, right? Like constructive criticism. To only be negative and to not have exactly what you just said, is to essentially have nothing. Is to continue to engage in this meaninglessness that is internet posting, if it's going to have any meaning at all. So, Jeremy, what are you working on this week?
I'm going back to working on Manji-sai a lot this week. So I was working on it quite a bit last week, and it was, it really drove up my passion for it again. So it's just kind of been I wouldn't say in a lull, but it was like, all right. But this last week really kind of picked it up again. So I kind of want to keep on that fire again. So
following a positive doctor's prognosis, hopefully, I'm gonna try to possibly start making some more stuff of personal training, like kind of like day-to-day type training stuff, and just really work on. Last week I was talking about making goals, and I know what my goals need to be now because of the recent doctor's visit. But just also share, what training I'm doing, and kind of see what other feedback I get. Leave myself out there to be criticized. Maybe help some keyboard warriors get away from what they're doing. Cool. I guess in terms of a plug we can make is in 15 days time from now, or 14 days time from now, I guess, depending what time you are in the time zone. There'll be the 100 kata day, or karate day. So we'll definitely be talking about that. Maybe even doing some video on that. Keep an eye out for a new thing that's coming down the way, Bujin TV. I'm not going to say too many details about it, but looks like we might be on there.
Very cool.
Jeremy will be, of course, executive producing most of the content on there.
Yeah, whatever.
All right, folks. Well, this is us signing off. Everyone take care.
Take care. Have a good one.
And don't forget to keep training.
In Russia, karate does not give you belt. You give belt to karate.